Well, my dear friends, last week we were in John chapter 3, and Jesus was speaking to a man named Nicodemus, a Pharisee, a leader of the Pharisees, a theological expert. And I said, that conversation is one of the most profound, most life changing, most theologically dense conversations that we have in the entire Bible. Some of you are going to get annoyed with me because I'm about to say the exact same thing about this conversation that Jesus has with this woman at the well near Sychar. That this is one of the most profound, most life-changing, most theologically dense conversations that we have in the entire scriptures. Now, what's fascinating is that who Jesus was talking to last week could not be more different from the woman that he is speaking to this week. Nicodemus last week was a Pharisee, a Jewish man. This is a Samaritan woman. That means a lot. So, firstly, the fact that last week Nicodemus, when Jesus was talking to a male, this woman is a female. In Middle Eastern culture at this time in history, that was a major taboo. Men did not speak to women in public unless they were married. So that's a big deal. This woman's a Samaritan. A few centuries before Christ, the Assyrian Empire came in and wiped out the northern tribes of Israel and took most of their people into exile, left the very, very poor. And all these other different ethnicities came into that northern Israel region called Samaria. And they mixed together and they brought in their own religious ideas as well. So you had a people that were not only ethnically mixed, but also religiously mixed. If you would have asked them, they still would have said that they worship the true God. They actually had the first 5 books of the Old Testament. They kind of ignored everything else. But they had a lot of the false pagan ideas from other nations infiltrating that as well. So the Jews hated the Samaritans. They saw the Samaritans as mutts. And the Jews are purebred, and the Samaritans are mutts. And the Samaritans likewise hated the Jews. Nicodemus also not only was a Jewish man, but he was a morally righteous figure. A seminary professor, a Bible expert, a pastor of pastors. Well, this woman is a moral outcast. We're going to see why. And so you see, Jesus is breaking a lot of barriers. He's breaking the gender barrier. He's breaking the race barrier. He's breaking the religion barrier. He's breaking the moral barrier because he feels like he needs to talk to this woman. Why? Because she's thirsty. She's thirsty. And Jesus is the water of life that quench all thirst. So let's dig into this conversation. Firstly, you have to notice something. This conversation is just really, really odd and bizarre. A conversation like this would never happen, especially not only because Jesus, a Jewish man, is speaking to a Samaritan woman, but you notice at what time of day it was happening? It was happening at noon. If you talk to anyone from Arizona or New Mexico or any place that's an arid desert region, they're going to tell you all the same thing. If you have to do outside labor, don't do it in the middle of the day. Do it at morning or evening. Don't do it when the sun is high, because that sun is not only hot, it's actually it's dangerous to your health, right? You're going to die of heat stroke. And so the fact that this woman is going out to gather water from a well, which is hard, strenuous work to pull that jar filled with water from the well, in the middle of the day while the sun is at its hottest, that's very odd. What's also odd is that she is alone. Middle Eastern women at this time would always go draw water in the morning, in the cool of the day, together. They would go with their friends for obvious safety reasons. So why is this woman alone? Why isn't she with her friends? Because she doesn't have it. She is a moral outcast. No one wants to be seen with her. No one wants to be seen talking to her except Jesus. And Jesus asks for something that wouldn't be that uncommon. Hey, it's hot out. I'm thirsty. Can you give me some water? And you can tell she's both surprised and a bit annoyed that he would ask. You're a Jewish man. You're going to ask me, a Samaritan woman, for water? Get lost. And this comes off kind of rude. And Jesus kind of ignores her rudeness and continues the conversation and says, well, if you knew what God wanted to give you, and if you knew who I truly am, you would ask me for water, and I would give you living water. Living water was a term back then. If you had a spring that water would shoot up from, that they called that living water. It was like the water was alive. He said, I can give it to you. You should ask me. And now she's clearly annoyed. Really? You have living water? Sir, you draw it. What when are you going to living water? And then you kind of tell where she's a little bit jaded towards Jewish people, because then she'll say, "Oh, classic Jewish arrogance. You think you people are so much better, and your springs and your water so much better than our Samaritan springs. What, you think you're better than our father Jacob? He gave us this well. He's your ancestor too. You think you're better than Jacob?" Which, well, she had any idea who she was talking to. But Jesus brushes that off. He clarifies and says, the water that you get from here, you're going to have to come back. It's not going to satisfy you for long. You're going to get thirsty again, and you're going to have to come back to this well over and over again. The water I give you will never thirst again. And in fact, you'll not only never thirst again, you will never die. You will live forever. Okay. It's hard to tell how sincere she actually is when she says the next thing. She might be being sarcastic, like, "Oh, give me this water." But let's assume the best. Let's assume that she's actually genuinely interested in what Jesus has to say. So she says, "Okay, hey, what you have water that's not making you thirst anymore? Hey, that sounds great. I hate coming out here. It's hot. Sure, give me this water." And it kind of seems like, okay, she doesn't quite understand what Jesus is getting at quite yet. He seems to be talking about a different kind of thirst, not a physical thirst. And so, how can Jesus get her to see the kind of thirst that he's talking about? Well, he says, "Go get your husband." She says, I don't have, which is technically true. Not completely honest. There's a lot more to the story there. And she's probably hoping that Jesus doesn't pry and ask more, and he doesn't have to. I know you don't have a husband. You've had 5, which not exactly sure what he means by that. It could be that she had literally been married 5 times, but had been unfaithful in all those marriages and therefore divorced. Or it could mean that she has been with 5 or more men, but now the man that you are with now is not your husband. What's Jesus doing? Is he shaming her just for the sake of it? Is he purposely humiliating her and giving all of her throwing all of her dirty laundry in her face? Is he purposely doing that? No. He is showing her that she has a deeper thirst that she is trying to satisfy. We talked about Nicodemus, right? Nicodemus, who we talked about last week, the high moral religious character, and this immoral woman. They couldn't be any more different, but actually they're very similar. Nicodemus was thirsty. The Pharisees and all highly religious people are thirsty. Thirsty for righteousness, thirsty for worthiness. They think that if they do enough moral righteous deeds, if they do enough obedience, if they are good enough, eventually they will be enough. And this woman is just as thirsty, just like the Pharisees, but she's using something different to satisfy her thirst. She thinks that if enough people think that she's beautiful, if enough people accept her, if enough men hold her in their arms, and if she gives her body to enough men, eventually maybe this one will actually make her feel like she's enough and desirable and worthy, and then she will be. And it's not working. And Jesus is showing her, you're thirsty. You are thirsty. I can satisfy what you were actually thirsty for. Let me ask you this. If Jesus were having this conversation with you, and he were trying to get you to see your thirst, what do you think he would say to you? Maybe he would say, "Oh, go get your phone and show me your search history." Maybe he would say, go show me your credit card bill. Go show me what you've been watching on TV for the last 2 weeks. Go show me how many hours you've been on your phone. Go show me the last 5 conversations you've had about yourself, and show me the dishonest things that you've said about yourself and others to make yourself look better. Maybe he would say, go tell me about the things that you've done for attention. Go show me all the hours that you've logged into work. Go show me the things that you've been searching for. Go show me the things that you've said. Go show me the last person that you slept with. He would confront. Not to humiliate. Not to make you feel bad for the sake of it, but to show you we are all desperately thirsty. Desperately thirsty. The reason you care so much about what people think about you, and you obsess over it, and you're constantly trying to make yourself look better to your friends, or your work colleagues, or your boss, or your family, or your parents, is because deep down you are thirsty for acclaim, thirsty for applause, thirsty for acknowledgement. The reason you care so much about money and status is because deep down there is a thirst that says, if I just have enough, if I just accomplish enough, if I just have enough in my bank account, well, then I will be enough. The reason you are so angry at everyone else who's not as religious or righteous or obedient as you, and you are so obsessed about following every single rule, and it's never enough, because deep down there is a thirst that says, well, maybe if I do enough and I'm obedient enough, well, then I will be able to stand before God and I will be enough. And Jesus comes to you and says, you're thirsty. You're thirsty. And I am the water of life that can quench your thirst forever. Does anyone here have a hard time forgiving others? And they're bitter and they're angry at people that aren't as moral as you, but seem to have a more carefree life. Anyone bothered by it? Anyone have a hard time forgiving others? You know why? Because you're thirsty for justice. You're thirsty for fairness. You're thirsty for a world that people get what they deserve, and righteousness is rewarded and sin is punished. You're thirsty for that. You know what? That's exactly what Jesus promises you. When he comes back and judgment day happens, all things are made completely right. Is anyone here thirsty to be desired, to be loved, to be accepted? Jesus Christ loves you so much that even though you were a sinner, even though you were his enemy, he gladly suffered for you everything that you deserved, just so he could have you and hold you in his arms and proclaim you as his chosen perfect child. That is how loved you are. That is how desired you are. That is how valuable you are to the one who is infinitely valuable, God himself. Does anyone here thirst for security and safety? And you thirst that maybe if I just vote for the right person, or if the right people are in power, then we'll have a safe, truly safe, secure society. Which, newsflash, it doesn't work that way. We live in a simple world. You're never going to be completely secure. Well, Jesus Christ, by rising from the dead, has given you infallible proof that all things are going to be okay. All things are going to be made new. That you are going to be resurrected and glorious. And he, Christ, is ruling all things in this world for you. That doesn't mean that bad things aren't going to happen. They will. But Jesus only allows pain into our lives in order to better us and to humble us and to remind us that he's near, that he uses pain to show us how much he loves us. It's an odd thing, and at first it doesn't make sense, but once you go through it, it actually does make sense. Does anyone here desire beauty, glory? They want to be attractive. They want to be beautiful. They want to be glorious. Does anyone here thirst for that? Do you have any idea what Jesus has in store for you? That in the new heavens and the new earth, you will have a new resurrected body without sin, without imperfection, so glorious that if you saw it now, you would tremble in fear. That is what God gives to you. Everything that you desire is ultimately found in Jesus and what he has done for you and what he is going to give you. He is the living water that satisfies every single one of your thirsts. And that's what Jesus is saying to this woman here. Hey, I am the water that can satisfy your thirst. And then she says something kind of odd. She says, well, okay, great. Yeah, okay, you're obviously a prophet. What's it with you Jews in the temple? Now, on the surface, it probably seemed like she was like changing the subject because she didn't want to talk about her sinful life. I don't think that's actually what she's doing. Kind of interesting. So she acknowledges that she has sinned. She acknowledges that she has disobeyed God and has not lived according to his ways. In the Old Testament, when you had sinned, what would you do? And you wanted forgiveness from God, what would you have to do? You would have to go to the temple and offer a sacrifice. And the sacrificial animal would take the punishment that you deserve, and God would grant you forgiveness. Right? But you'd have to do that at the temple. Now, the Samaritans had a temple. It was on Mount Gerizim. And so when she says, our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, Mount Gerizim would have actually been visible from that. So, hey, this mountain, we worship there. But what happened was, 100 years earlier, the Jews came and destroyed their temple. They said, no, only one temple. That's the temple in Jerusalem. That's where you can make sacrifices. But the thing is, this woman's a Samaritan. She's not allowed at the temple. And so you can see her frustration. She says, okay, yeah, I need a sacrifice. Yeah, something needs to die in my place so that I can be forgiven. And I know that needs to happen at the temple. But guess what? Guess who's not allowed to come to the temple? Me. So how's this going to work? She's telling us that we can't go to your temple. And Jesus then tells her, no, eventually, that's not even going to matter. That's not going to matter at all. Now, he does correct her false Samaritan theology and says, well, you Samaritans, you have a lot of things wrong. You say you worship God, but you don't do so according to what he says in his word. So you worship what you don't know. We Jews, we have the word of God. We're obedient to it. We worship what we know. It's not saying the Jews are all perfect. It's saying that they have the word of God and the Samaritans don't really follow it. But then Jesus says, but a time has come. And it's already here. Where the temple's not even going to be. It's just not. And you think, well, wait a minute, the temple? This is the most important thing in the Testament. The sacrifices at the temple are the way that God's people can know that they are forgiven. How can Jesus just say that? Nah, it's not going to matter anymore. It doesn't matter anymore. What? How? Because Jesus Christ is the true temple. Where God dwells in flesh. And Jesus Christ is the true sacrifice who would go on the cross, whose blood of infinite value would pay for every single sin, the sacrifice to end all sacrifices. And when Jesus dies on the cross, the temple the curtain in the temple that separates God from the rest of the world is torn in two. That Jesus' sacrifice on the cross is going to do away with sin forever and reconcile God and humanity, even the worst of humanity, once more forever. And this woman, she hears all this and she says, whoa, yeah, man, that's too much for me. I just know that when the Messiah comes, he's going to come, he's going to explain all of this. And then Jesus says, and literally in the Greek, he says, I am. That's all he says in Greek. I am. Now, where have you heard that before? The burning bush. Moses in the Old Testament. God reveals himself and he says, I am. And this woman would have been familiar with that. Jesus is very clearly telling, I am the God of your ancestors. I am the God who has come down to die for you. I am the God who has to forgive you. And I am the God who has forgiven you. I am the God who accepts you, even you. Trust in me. Okay, so when I first wrote this sermon, it was like 1,000 words longer than normally my sermons are, just because there's so much I wanted to add in. I had mercy on you, and I chose one. I chose one thing. I'm going to point out one question that I want you to think about as you read today. How does Jesus deal with sinners? How does Jesus deal with sinful people, especially outwardly sinful people? Does he shame them? Does he humiliate them? No. Does he simply affirm them and say everything is a-okay? No. He lovingly confronts them and patiently confronts them. Right? Anyone else knows how patient Jesus is with this woman? Oh, but he patiently, lovingly says, hey, this isn't right. Not in order to embarrass her, but to show that she's thirsty. And then he offers himself as the living water that she is actually looking for. So how do we as Christians deal with sinful people? Not just the sinful people here in church, but the sinful people out there. We don't, Jesus and his church, we do not shame people. We do not humiliate people, but we also don't simply affirm people and say everything is fine. We have the living water. We have the water that gives life and quenches all of our deepest thirst. When you work with the people that you love, have enough courage to ask them, is this satisfying your thirst? When you see someone who's constantly drunk, or you see someone who is sleeping around constantly, someone who's constantly doing things, stupid things for attention, someone who's constantly virtue signaling and showing everyone how moral and religious or politically right they are. When you see someone constantly lying about themselves and others to make themselves look better, when you see someone who is just obsessed with money and accomplishment, what should you see? You shouldn't see an enemy. You shouldn't see someone that you should shame or someone to just be affirmed. You should see someone who is profoundly thirsty. And you have the water of life. Challenge them. Is this working for you? And on a lot more times than you think, people are going to be honest enough to say, you know what? No, it's not. Offer them the water of life. The 1,500 years ago, there was a man, essentially the male equivalent of this woman, a serial adulterer, constantly sleeping around in the brothels. He was also kind of an egomaniac. In the ancient Roman world, you could, if you wanted people to clap for you all the time, you would enter the discipline of rhetoric. So he was a public speaker, and that was his expertise in giving public speeches that people would clap at. Like that was his thing, and he was thirsty. He was thirsty for sexual pleasure. He was thirsty for people to clap for him, thirsty for pride, thirsty for acclaim, thirsty for applause. And eventually, he realized it wasn't working. In fact, it was more like salt water. It seemed so refreshing, but it made him only thirsty. And he became a Christian. And his name was Augustine, one of the most important theologians of the early church. And after he became a Christian, he wrote down some of the most beautiful words that we have. He said, God, you have created us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you. My friends, our hearts are all thirsty, and they will be thirsty until they are quenched with the true living water. Drink up. Amen.